Well, welcome everybody. I'm happy to be here today. My name is Dave Hicks. I'm with TBM Consulting, and I'm thrilled to have a couple good friends and former clients of TBM, and Quinn and John McGrath. Kevin and John both worked at a large food packaging company. We can start talking about that. I checked our records earlier, and I think it was 2007 when we first started working with this company. So been around for a long time with these guys and have seen many challenging times, all of us. And so I'm grateful for Kevin and John for you guys being here today. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Dave.
Great to be here.
Yeah, good. So let's jump in. One of the things we wanted to talk about today was in today's economy, we're teetering on this notion of going into recession. And so, guys, look, we're pretty close to the same age. We've been doing this stuff for a long time, longer than we probably want to admit, and we've been through some recessions before. So what can you tell me about some of the impacts of tough economic times on business in general, or specifically the company that you both helped run?
Sure. Well, thanks, Dave. I'll start, and then Kevin can follow on. Again, I'm John McGrath. I worked for this company for 36 years. Started out in sales and ran through all the significant leadership positions throughout my 36-year tenure. The one thing that was pretty much standard with the company was that we made packaging for food and for beverages. That was our basic business, and this packaging is made from a variety of different materials. Even in tough economic times, as we found throughout, again, my 36 years with the company, even in tough economic times, people still have to eat and they still have to drink. But what they eat and where they get their food or beverage from and where and how they consume it, that tends to vary when you go through some economic challenges. So for instance, during recessionary periods, people eliminate perhaps some of the discretionary purchases that they would have on food and beverage, but they are still buying the basic subsistence food and beverage items in order to feed themselves and their family. So at our company, we knew we had the right products for all of those applications, but we had to be really astute to understand the direction the market was heading and anticipate some of those changes to make sure that we had the right products in the right inventories in our warehouses. So as those demands would shift based on the economic changes, we were able to still meet the needs of our customer. And I know, Kevin, you have some thoughts on this as well.
I do. Thank you, John. Yes. One of the things I feel is really important is we got to message our employees that, we've been down this road before. The economy always goes through cycles, and everyone's very upbeat when times are good, but when times get tough, we need to make sure that we emerge much stronger. Historically, as we've gone through these cycles, we have emerged as a much stronger company. Why? Because really it's to focus on our customers. Unfortunately, not all companies make it through an economic downturn. So, at times like this, it's really opportunistic for the company to look at customers that we didn't have in the past that we would have liked to have that are aligned with perhaps weaker competitors. And also, this also is a very ripe time for acquisitions in the marketplace. So, opportunities that perhaps we were always looking for in the past, may come to the surface as companies struggle with the uncertainty of the economic conditions.
Yeah, Kevin, so that's a really good point. Essentially what you're saying is let's take advantage of this economic condition to learn not only about our business, but other businesses and how we can use that information to grow.
Exactly. I think it's important that during these times, you don't play a victim, right? These times are going to get better, okay? Someone is going to win, and unfortunately, someone is going to lose, all right? Well, guess what? We want to be on the winning side. So we want to make sure that we're very focused on what is it going to make this company stronger as we come out of this economic downturn and position ourselves for the long-term growth of the company.
Yeah, and John, you were talking about the portfolio of products that you had and how some of them let's say we go through a recession, some of those products sales may go down, but on the other hand, you've got other products that are going to balance that, and as their sales go up. I assume that was a conscious decision as you created that portfolio.
That's a great point, Dave. As we look to build out our portfolio over many years, both through internal development and through acquisitions, we wanted to make sure, number one, that we had the right products, the right types of products to meet those ever-changing needs. But equally as important, we wanted to make sure we had the right materials to make those products out of. So, when Kevin and I left the company was making products out of 14 basic materials. So we were a lot better positioned than a lot of our competitors. And to Kevin's point, a lot of those increased capabilities that we actually put on during times of economic uncertainty. I remember in the 2008, 2009 timeframe when we were in a recession. We actually made 2 acquisitions during that period of time of companies that were not so well positioned, and those 2 acquisitions ended up paying big dividends for us down the road.
Yeah, interesting. So, guys, what are some of the things, if you think about, John, you mentioned 7, 8, 9, we had the Great Recession, but also back in 01, we lived through some recessions. Early 90s, we lived through those recessions, and then obviously the COVID in 2020. What kind of things did you do to address these crises?
So I'll take it from the COVID perspective, since that's freshest, at least on my mind. COVID was a major disruption to many businesses, throughout the United States and globally. Our business in particular, especially as it relates to the food service part of our business, was impacted in that as economies and cities and different locations shut down and barred people from going to restaurants. Obviously, we can't sell a lot of packaging, or we couldn't sell a lot of packaging if people weren't going to the restaurants. But, I think during that period of time, the leadership team reflected on what was going on, in real time. And we were understanding that the only restaurants that were going to survive were ones that, even though they had to close their doors for in-person dining, the ones that amped up their takeout and their delivery programs were the ones that were going to survive. So we saw a lot of our customers, a lot of our major customers that might not have done a really good job in takeout and delivery prior to COVID, really get off the ground and stand up a program that was beneficial to them on the backside coming out of COVID. But the phenomena for us was that we had in our food service packaging business, we made containers to carry food, and we made various kinds of cups for beverages. So if you think about takeout and delivery, and think about the last time you got something from a restaurant, most of the time you'll get all the time you'll get the food, and the food will come packaged in a container. So good for us. We were selling lots of containers. But on the flip side, most of the people that got delivery or takeout weren't getting the beverages. So they were using beverages that they had in their refrigerator or that they were getting elsewhere. So our sales of cups specifically during the onset of the pandemic were fairly anemic. Kevin and his team had the foresight to develop our manufacturing footprint to where we had some fungibility within that equipment. And as we saw the trend shift away from cups to more and more containers, we pivoted very quickly and shut down or transformed equipment that was making plastic cups and flipped that around so that same equipment could make more containers to meet the demand. So I think our ability to build in that fungible capacity was key, and it really helped us weather the storm, if you will, throughout COVID.
Yeah, just following up on what John said, specifically during COVID, we all recognize that cash is the lifeblood of a company, and so the old adage, from a business perspective, cash, if I have it, nothing else matters. If I don't have it, nothing else matters. So we really focused on our cash management, and we start with our inventories, and we're very concerned about inventory efficiency, i.e., what's sitting in our warehouses that, is going to stay there forever, SKUs with high days of supply. So we went about addressing that and quite frankly, holding some fire sales to get rid of it to improve the efficiency and turnover all of our inventory. This enabled a couple things. First off, it enabled us to get out of some outside warehouses that, again, just increased the complexity of our supply chain network. And then by doing so, allowed us to be, number one, more efficient, number two, much more cash efficient. And the second part we addressed was, how did we get in that situation in the first place, right? And it's that old tail of SKUs that you sell, the low moving items, the customers want that we think we're making money on. Well, we went out and John pushed us really hard is really the whole profit margin, the profitability of the tail. And typically we found that, that was making money, what was making money in the past isn't necessarily making money for us right now. And we would go out and cut that tail and cut it dramatically, anywhere from 20 to 30%. And that took bold leadership, from really our leadership team to go out and tell our customers, hey, we're no longer going to offer this. But what that did was significantly reduce the complexity in our manufacturing plants, right? Think about all the different changeovers that we had to endure. And then again, taking that back into the warehouse network, all the new slots in the warehouse that we could free up based upon, literally reducing unprofitable SKUs that we were working on. So that was some of the things that we're really focused on to increase our cash. Other things that we talked about also was looking at our most efficient lines in manufacturing. With the drawback in total sales, could we move, products to different lines, our more efficient lines, and lay up or really kind of shut down and idle some of our less efficient lines. This reduces, again, our complexity from our maintenance organization, our maintenance spend, and allows us to really be the most efficient running products on our most efficient lines, to minimize our cost structure. Another thing we always like to look at is shift schedules. No one likes to change a shift schedule, but when capacity utilization is down dramatically, switching from a 7-day schedule to a 5-day schedule frees up an awful lot of cash. And quite frankly, employees enjoy that. They get much more time off. So not only did it improve our cash flow, it also improved our morale throughout the situation. So those were some of the things that we really looked at and leaned upon, during the most recent pullback due to COVID.
Yeah, and I think, additionally, Kevin, the one thing that, and I'll give Kevin all the credit for this. Early on, we figured out that, with the availability of temporary labor, which was out there pre-COVID, that we would use that staffing model in our facilities, and when we had ups or downs in our production commitments, based on the demand, we had the ability to quickly add or quickly shed that labor with very little adverse impact to the rest of the organization. I think also in some of our plants where we could not repurpose the equipment during COVID, Kevin and his team figured out that we could furlough some of the people, not lay them off, furlough them, still take care of them from a benefit standpoint, but furlough them for a short period of time until we had better visibility of the demand. And that worked out real well. And I think when we bounced back, we had the ability to recoup or recover all those folks and put them right back to work in the factories.
Excellent. Yes.
Yeah. So a couple things, guys, you were talking about, John, it was really interesting when you were talking about restaurants that pivoted to make that takeout so that they could stay in business. And I remember those restaurants. My wife and I frequented. We'd go pick stuff up instead of going in and sitting down. But what Kevin described was you guys doing exactly the same thing, only on a much larger scale in the manufacturing world, right? So you got to make that pivot. You got to recognize that, hey, this product line's not going to sell during this period of time. What can I run on that equipment that we can get out in the market? So I think that's a great analogy. So we talked a lot about the manufacturing and some of the things that you did there. What about other parts of the business? As you've seen economic downturns, are there areas in the business aside from the manufacturing that you need to pay special attention to and deal with?
So I think, beginning around 2010, when we were acquired by an individual investor, we had a pretty significant reorganization that took place where we did a bunch of delayering throughout the salaried workforce. We changed the organization structure to make it a lot more lean and efficient. So we actually bulletproofed ourselves to some extent from economic, swings, because we came into those periods with a leaner workforce. I'd say on the commercial side, we went to market with kind of a hybrid model where we had our own direct salespeople, as well as we employed a pretty large, call it manufacturers representatives or brokers, where those brokers would not get paid a salary. They wouldn't get paid a benefit. They were strict commission. So they only got paid on what they sold. So it was kind of, not an easy way, but it was a seamless way to reduce the commercial or the sales cost, because if you weren't selling, if sales were down, we just weren't paying as much from a commission standpoint. So we were able to get costs out there. Despite having a lean organization to start with, though, we actually had we were faced with some situations, I guess the best way to put it, where we had to, look at making some other cuts in functional areas besides just, doing some things differently in manufacturing. We didn't take those decisions lightly. During my tenure with the company, I think we had to do that at least 2 times that I can recollect. But our methodology was we started furthest away from the customer. So we wanted to make whatever we did internally, we wanted to make it have the least impact on the customer from a quality standpoint, from a service standpoint, the ability to take and process orders. So if you think about an organization, anything customer facing, we tried to leave intact and looked, if we had to eliminate roles that were furthest away from the customer. Kevin?
Yeah, another important thing to look at is as a company faces uncertainty out there, we got to recognize the fact that our suppliers and our customers are also facing uncertainty. And specifically with our customers, we recognize that not everyone was going to make it through each of these downturns. So we paid very, very close attention to our accounts receivable. The last thing you want to do is get caught with a huge accounts receivable and the customer goes into insolvency and you get a terrific write-off. So that was important to keep a close eye on our customers, making sure that they're going to survive. And then, going back upstream is looking at our suppliers. Business was still, relatively steady, and we still had an awful lot of demand running through our factories. And we had to make sure that we had all the raw materials and all the supplies available for us to meet the demands that were still out there. So it was very important to take a look at our supplier base and make sure that they're in good financial health and are able to supply us through these tough times. And again, it's always aligning with the winners. We always looked at that from our customer's perspective. We want to align with the winners out there, and the same with our suppliers. Chasing the lowest cost supplier is fine when in boom times, but when things get bad, that low cost supplier typically is not going to be there. And if you're the lowest price guy out there, you're the first guy that's going to get shorted out there. So it's very important to make sure you have a strategic look at both your customer base and also your supplier base. So,
yeah, no, great, two great points, John. I love that point about make those changes as far away from the customer as you can, so that they're isolated, they're insulated, they don't see that. And then Kevin, the whole notion of working with the suppliers. Most of us in manufacturing, we make something, but we're making that something out of something else. And if we don't have that to convert, then we're in big trouble. So that supply base is really, really important. So great points, guys. Let's move on then to the next question. So again, we've been around for a long time, guys. What general lessons would you say you've learned relative to not just challenging economic times, but maybe challenging times in general. John, you mentioned about the company you work for being acquired, and that certainly I work with a lot of clients that go through ownership changes, and that creates a ton of uncertainty in people.
I think, at a high level, if I think of, what lessons that I learned and that I would want to share with others, as it relates to changes in economic, different economic times. I guess the first thing is don't wait to develop a plan. I'd say that. I know it sounds very basic and generic, but I think too often companies assume that if things are going good, they're going to continue to go good, and there's no really impetus to do anything differently. And then when a crisis hits, they somewhat scramble in order to come up with a plan that effectively meets the changing times. You can't wait. I mean, you have to understand where your business is at any given point, and know that if things go south or go the wrong way, that you have a plan in place based on the level of severity. And by the same token, if things really grow aggressively and you find yourself on the short side of capacity, having a plan to quickly get that capacity needed in order to meet the changing demand. So I say number one is don't wait for a crisis to develop a plan. Number two is always maintain a lean organization structure. So understanding what is really required from a total, call it an SG&A standpoint, what's required to manage the business, and make sure you're there and you stay there. Too often there's a tendency within organizations to cut back or to come up with a leaner organization structure. But then as good times continue to roll forward, you see creep coming into the organization. You see different functional areas adding headcount and adding costs. You can't do that. You need to have an operation structure and an organization structure that takes care of your business in the good times and the bad times. And it shouldn't be, again, one where you have to think about if the economic situation shifts. I think Kevin mentioned staying focused on the customer. I can't overemphasize that. Just a hyper focus on the customer. It should be, that's what you're in business for. Okay, you're in business to take care of the customer. So regardless of the economic times that present themselves, your ability to take care of the customers, to make sure they get the quality product, the right amount of product they ordered, and that the product shows up when they need it is key. And then finally, it's and I think Kevin mentioned this also, it's staying really close to the organization. I know we frequently had town hall meetings. We had frequent one-on-ones with some of our key employees. But the message that, look, Kevin said this before, and I don't want to be redundant, but look, we've been here before. We'll get through this together. I mean, I think the reassurance that the organization gets from its leadership, and understanding that they had their hands firmly on the wheel, and that there's a team that's actually guiding this company through these tough times, I think that gives employees a lot of confidence, and I think you'll quell a lot of the instability that might arise, when there are economic challenges, if you stay really, really focused on communicating throughout the organization.
Yeah, just adding to what John said, when you look back in history, at all the different crises that happened throughout our lifetime and even before that, and you look at some of the traits of the leaders that managed through those crises, it was always about communication. I'll throw some examples out there. Churchill during World War II, during the Battle of Britain, when at their darkest hour, he was the voice of calm, the voice of reason, rousing the British people. John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Ronald Reagan during the Cold War, Lee Iacocca during the crisis right there on the edge of solvency. What did they all have in common? They were calm and they communicated well, and that's the key: is communicate to your employees, be the calm in the middle of the storm. Show that leadership that that quite frankly you're being paid to exhibit. And communicate with both your employees and your customers saying, hey, listen, we know what we're doing and we're going to get through this. and as John said earlier, have that plan. Okay, now's not the time to break out all to figure out the plans. The plans already should be on the shelf, and whether it's plan A, plan B, or plan C, it doesn't matter. And when, quite frankly, if you're implementing a plan in the old PDCA model, if it's not working quite well, quite right, make the adjustment as appropriate. So really, but show that leadership, and that's what senior leaders are being paid for. That's what they're hired for. And anybody can lead during boom times, but it's during these crises where true leadership shows its head. So
yeah, I think that's great advice. Is creating that plan before you feel like you're in that crisis, because I think we all know, when you've got those pressures on you, you're going to think and act differently than when you don't. And so you're much more likely to create a really good, solid plan. And I know
one other thing, if I add, Dave, is it's easy always to look internally, but I think it is important to get that outside view. Okay, making sure that what. Hey, we may have a plan, but does it make sense to us? But how about to a third party? And that's where the use of consultants come into play. Is you really bounce this stuff off ahead of time, and it's just really important to get outside your own paradigms and make sure that what you think is right is in fact right. Okay, verified by a competent third party.
Yeah, no, that's great. I know I was doing some research prior to our discussion. And I was a little bit surprised to learn, if you go back to 1980, there's been, half a dozen recessions, and on average, about 9.5 months. So we get into these things, and when it is happening, we think, me oh my, this is going to go on forever. But historically, it just hasn't been that long, and that's why that calm leadership can really help, keep people focused, keep them directed. That's great advice. So again, guys, any critical initiatives through uncertain times, and again, it doesn't have to be economic, could be whenever. What kind of thoughts do you have around that?
So yeah, I'll start again. Look, probably in Kevin and my own career, probably the biggest time of uncertainty that we would have experienced would have been when in 2010 we were a public company and we were purchased by an individual investor. We didn't know a whole lot about the investor, although we did know his reputation for buying companies, and mainly public companies, and figuring out ways to improve profitability. So we knew at the onset that this was not going to be business as usual. For us, I think the first thing we got really focused on is what we wanted to try and do in the very near term, and then what we wanted to get done in the business in the 3 to 5 year horizon. And this is where we really utilized TBM and their strategy deployment process. We had used it in a abbreviated fashion prior to the 2010-2011 timeframe, but we really got after this in earnest after we were acquired. And I think the process, for those of you not familiar with it, the process is a great one in that you get the leadership team together for a few days to really understand what are the both internal and external factors that are impacting the business. You identify where you want the business to be in the near term as well as in the out years, and then you develop specific strategies and goals that would then further cascade throughout the organization. So if you were to look at even down to the plant level, the objectives that those people had, they would all roll up to the broader objectives for manufacturing in total, which would then roll up to the broader objectives for the total company. So I think it was a very good process, and that helped us get off on the right foot. I think as a deliverable out of that, we went through some reorganization, and I think I indicated before, we had a lot of layers in our company that were redundant or unnecessary, so we did that. The one big thing we did also was we called it grab the checkbook. It really is just eliminating wasteful spending. And in any organization, if you do a deep dive into where you're spending, your money, not just the major cost of materials to make the product, but also all the costs associated with running your business. You find that you have a lot of waste that you can cut out and still have a very viable business. So eliminating wasteful spending, I think, was important. For us, we improved our pricing mechanics, and really, I think Kevin hit the nail on the head, making sure that we had commercial excellence built into our business, and that we were getting paid for those slow moving or short running items that we were charging appropriately to our customers to make sure we had the right price to start with. And then as raw materials escalate, we wanted to make sure we had the mechanisms for recouping those cost increases and passing those through in prices to our customers. We closed a bunch of underutilized facilities, and again, Kevin and I would argue that should have been done years ago, but under Kevin's leadership, I think we out of 75 facilities, I think we closed 20 within the first 18 months. And those were very underutilized facilities where we just took the good equipment and moved it to other locations. We really amped up our new product development efforts. I think, we were probably guilty of being a little set in our ways with our product offering. So we made a big push on new product development. And then probably the biggest enabler operations was we standardized the ways of working within our facilities. And again, with the help of TBM, who actually put people on site in our facilities, we standardized everything about every plant, the leader standard work, the way we monitored production, what we measured, how we made improvement, how we handled shift changes. I mean, all of that was being done, but not in a standardized format. And I think TBM, with them actually going into our facilities and helping us, we got to a point where no matter what facility you walked into, unless you saw the name on the front of the building that you walked into, you wouldn't know which facility you were in, because they all really looked the same once you got inside. And then finally, I think we made a bunch of transformative acquisitions early on that got us off on the right path. So again, times of uncertainty, the acquisition was probably the biggest for us. We knew that we didn't have the luxury of waiting. We got the 80% solution and executed violently, and we swept up the other 20%, I guess, as we went. But the results were pretty compelling. We made a significant improvement in our EBITDA in the first 18 months, and that pretty much sustained throughout our business. And as Kevin alluded to, we really significantly improved our cash position through working capital management initiatives.
Yeah. I think no matter how good you think your company is, there's still a ton of waste sitting out there. And so you really need to leave no stone unturned. And for as smart as we all think we are, when we get together as a group, the team is smarter than the individual. So, one of the things that we like to do is really engage with the consultants, to get that third party look at it, and also engage with our supplier base. How are we buying? What does our buying patterns look like? How could we buy more efficiently to take costs out of the supply chain? And again, set up a win-win situation with our suppliers and with ourselves. On the downstream side, we did the same with our customers. We looked at their buying patterns. Why are you buying a half a truck, every week as opposed to one truckload every 2 weeks, or just really changing their patterns, changing how they buy from, where they buy from. And then we looked at really our products themselves and say, how do we package our products? Is our products packaged the most efficiently way to service the needs of our customers downstream, and also, to service our own internal needs from a cost perspective? We get huge gains by really changing packouts, changing orientation of our products for better cube utilization. So it's easier for our customers to handle the products on their end and get more product density. Oftentimes we're selling to places that get limited storage facilities, and therefore we can increase their density, increase their turns, at the same time take costs out of their network, and it's while simultaneously taking costs out of our own network. We reduced the number of trucks that we ship to our customers by over 20% by just changing order patterns and our product orientation in the trucks, in the trailers themselves. So again, you can't do that in a vacuum. You got to do that in really cooperation with your customer base on that. And then internally, again, leaving no stone unturned, look at all your cost of goods sold, all your major components. Obviously your raw material is the most significant cost, and there's always lots of eyes on that. But what about all of the other cost elements of your cost of goods sold? Again, packaging materials, energy, labor costs, and engaging with all of those really interested parties to help drive waste out of those systems. And I would tell you that anyone who treats energy as a fixed cost, really is doing a disservice themselves. There's tons of money to be saved on how you purchase energy and how you use energy. So really, and I guess I'll end with training. Really, is looking at training of our employees is more as an investment than an expense. The smarter our employees are, the better trained they are, the more efficient our operations are going to run. And really, when you talk about engaging a workforce of over 10,000 employees and everyone's rowing in the same directions, there's so many gains to be had out there that you as a management team just can't see them all. But together as a team, working together with trained employees, committed employees, the sky is the limit. So I'll end on that one, Dave.
Okay, great. Well, let me just a couple comments, and I'll kind of start, Kevin, with that last thought and work my way back. But one of the things that we see in today's world, every client that we deal with has problems hiring people and has problems keeping people on, right? The companies that are successful are the ones that are doing what you just described. They're training their employees. They're making them feel like they're part of a team. They're not putting them out in a factory and ignoring the fact that they exist. So not only is that important for those things, but in today's world, it helps you retain the employees that you do have. So that's really important. I also like the comment you were talking about, when you talk about working with your customers, essentially managing the order pattern that we have, that, all of us tend to think that, the customer is going to do what the customer is going to do. We forget the fact that we can work with these folks and we can change the demand pattern a little bit that suits our business even better. So that's really good. Now, having worked with the company before and after the acquisition, that level of urgency that you described, I always felt the company had a pretty high level of urgency to begin with, but in 2010, that thing went off the chart. So and people responded well to that, so that was good. And then finally, when you talked about strategy deployment and the notion of aligning the objectives of the senior leadership team to all the other activities that go on in the organization, that's really a good tool for that. And Kevin, you had talked before about communication, the fact that you really can't over communicate. When you do have a good strategy deployment system in place, there is a lot of communication that goes along with that. So employees really do understand the business and where the business is headed. So I think, guys, I think we've come to the end of our time. I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your schedule to chat with us. I always learn something when I talk to you guys. I've loved working with you for over 15 years now. So any parting shots that you want to take?
I don't know. I think we covered a lot of it, during the discussion here. I guess that the one constant is there's going to be change in the business outlook, in the economic situation. Business is dynamic. I tell people that, if business was easy, they wouldn't need, any leadership. They wouldn't need consultants. They wouldn't need anything. They just plug the business in and it would run by itself and make a lot of money. But obviously we know that's not the case, and that things have to change. So the ability to very quickly adapt to changes, I think, is important. And I can't overemphasize the fact of don't wait till you have to in order to develop, a plan. Have those plans, have the what ifs, already gamed out, so you don't have to scramble when times get a little challenging.
Yeah, reinventing yourselves on a continuous basis is going to serve both the individual and the company well in the long run. So
yeah, good. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your time and all of your insight.
All right.
Great. Thanks, Dave.